bearish market is still on at the end of the Iran war, and yet upcoming the USDA report with updated estimates by Jerry Gidel right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Jerry, before we come into your estimates, I think the market has reacted recently about the improved crop conditions for corn and soybeans in the US, and also about the ceasefire that was agreed by the US and Iran, but it's still unclear if it's going to last. We don't know whether or not the Strait of Hormuz is still open. But I think the markets have the the agricultural commodities have detached from the energy market at this point.
Yes, I think there has been a little bit of independence going on there between the two, between the ag prices and crude oil prices at this point. Because actually, the crude oil prices have been pretty weak here this last week here, while the corn and soybeans stabilized. Even beans had a decent little pop and recovery here, but they all settled back here ahead of the long weekend uh, as we celebrated Juneteenth here in the U.S. From that standpoint, uh, the U.S. Uh, wheat harvest is moving along at a super pace here. We've actually had Oklahoma and Texas actually move up to clear like 75%. And some of that was in 35% jumps in the last week. I think that's maybe an indication that there isn't that many bushels of wheat out there, but that's still yet to be determined. We will not see a yield estimate on wheat until July, but we will get updates on acreages uh, on the 30th. But that's still ahead of us here at this point. The overall market activity here uh, is still uh, watching closely here what's happening in the Straits of Hormuz, as you mentioned. It's after the official signing of the peace agreement between the U.S. and Iran on Wednesday, and that the markets kind of hung in there for about a day because they're supposedly we're having the Israelis and the I'm going to say Ayatollah, but it's not right. Hezbollah in Lebanon get that settled out, but that has not been the case, and that has prompted some concerns about this whole thing still not being uh, officially settled at this point for the 60 days worth of negotiations. The U.S. happens to be in Pakistan ready to talk. I don't know though that Iran's ready to talk. They still think that the Israeli situation is not settled, and so they're thinking that the Straits of Hormuz are still closed. But that doesn't seem to be the case by the U.S. here at this point. We have had seen quite a few ships move through there. I wouldn't say it's uh, you know back to normal, but it's definitely been improved from where it has been so desperately poor for 4 or 5 months.
Yes, but on the other hand, the crop has significantly improved. The crop conditions have significantly improved in the U.S., and also that we have had no issues so far in South America.
Yes, well, the definitely the rains have improved during the month of June here across the Midwest. Actually, in some cases, for late planted stuff, I think we've actually had too much rain. But from there, the Missouri, parts of Illinois, and Kansas, northern Kansas areas, and that even Nebraska has had some heavy rains over the weekend here. So it's a mixed bag on where our crop conditions have improved. They're going to end up having some stability and recovery here. But at this point, if you small, um, we've actually had probably more potholes and issues occur here in the last couple of weeks than we had all spring because we were too dry most of the time and we didn't have any drowned outs until just the most recent time out here. The conditions during pollination and filling, though, are the most important part, and that starts 4th of July and after. It's going to be interesting as to where uh, we we are running so far ahead on heat this spring until the last 2 or 3 weeks, and now the forecast doesn't have a lot of heat in it, so I'm not sure how fast we're going to get the pollination here in the month of July, but that's ahead of us at this point. The markets right now are definitely going to continue to focus on what's happening in the Mid East and also yeah, any crop improvements or crop conditions that come out here on Monday afternoon. But we also end up having the USDA important numbers coming out here on both acreages and also our quarterly stocks reports, which is uh, quite important, I think, particularly staring at the corn number here. Uh, there's been a lot of angst in my neighborhood about how big that crop was last year and is it really there or not? And I guess we'll get our next update on that on
Yeah,
June 30th.
so what are the main changes in the acreage that you are seeing at this point?
Well, I think there's some people out there thinking that the activity here this spring maybe even saw a pickup in corn. The corn prices were definitely sluggish during the spring here. And that, and with not a great spring jump in during the month of April because of rain and that, I think some people still moved ahead and moved some of their acres over from corn to soybeans. I'm looking for about a hundred excuse me, 1.35 million decline down to just a smidgen under uh, 94 million at 93.95. And I'm looking for about 125 million increase in soybeans. Uh, this is uh, to some extent in the plains areas and that because of the limited yield potentials there along the way. Also, I think the spring wheat scenario was a little sluggish this year in plantings, but I think with the strong wheat prices that we had this last, oh, basically from mid-March until late May here because of the combination of the Mideast scenarios and the very, very poor U.S. conditions here. And that I think that there was a push in the spring wheat areas to increase their acres by May 230, 40 million. And just a slight increase, maybe 20 million in soft or in Durham, and that. Uh, Even I think the other areas here, that 100,000, we could see some increases in sorghum in the Southwest because of the corn plantings in Kansas and Texas maybe have got impacted because of the weather that's occurred in that part of the world from there. But in general, I think that makes the yield situation even more important on corn this year. With well, totally here, that's going to bring our total. We had about 330 million down to begin with, and you had another 130 million. That's a pretty significant pullback in corn, and that soybean increases. Uh, a million acres just creates 50 to 55 million more beans, so it's not as significant there. I think also La Nina's impact on next year's South American crop could be quite significant. That's a typical scenario when we get there. In the short term, no. There's South America's got a good crop coming, but that's still something that it's not important longer term. And then, of course, on stocks reports, that's going to be another feature that the market's going to look at closely. We've had uh, some interesting quarterly corn stocks here, showing some very strong demand. I guess the old key of that is was the corn there to begin with? The USDA really had an amazing number here at the end of last year, 185 bushel U.S. crop, and sometimes the projections from the fields sometimes don't always get to the actual bin, and so what's in the bin is really going to be the important part of what we have here for overall production for last year. I guess right now the trend on what it says, we should have a stocks number around 5.4 billion bushels, giving a seasonal increase here a little bit versus last year on that, plus what we've already seen. But if for some reason or other we are not at 5.4 billion, and particularly if you happen to come in with 5.3, like 100 million or more lower on this June 1 stocks, that would definitely kind of put everybody squinting on last year's crop sizes and what kind of carryover stock we might have at the end of the year. So I think that's where the focus is going to be. Soybeans, not as much usual issues there. We've had very strong uh, uh, U.S. crushing statistics, and they look like they're on target for that number. There's always a little, right now at least, there's still some uncertainties about what our soybean crush will be. No, the crush, uh, excuse me, our exports. We've crush, I think, is pretty solid. The U.S. projections on exports have sunk the last couple months here, and that yeah, we've got I think, a chance to meet those numbers, and so that really projects a number about 1 billion 50 million, uh, and that will also be a test as to where we're at on last year's crop size, but not as much uncertainty there in the soybeans. Wheat, the stocks numbers here, uh, they're projecting a number there around 900. They kind of look like they're going to be probably closer to 924 million, just because of some late lackluster export demand and that. But the wheat market doesn't, its focus is going to be on happening in the field, not what's in the bin at this point, this time of year for beginning stocks. And right now, I think that one still has a lot of uncertainty going on what our crop size for 2026 U.S. winter wheat. That's going
Yeah,
to be a
so
key.
are you still bearish for the prices mostly?
Not enthusiastic about uh, the price points at this point. I think the key thing is I think we kind of muddle along here and potentially go sideways here because there hasn't been much selling in the country. I think there's still some needs for that, and also I think that if this corn stocks number shows some issues there, all of a sudden instead of a 2.1 carryover, we have a 1.9 or something like that. Ideas. That's a pretty significant factor there of last year's corn size. Our corn production number will be revised down later this year, but that's not going to happen for a while. It'll be just the assumption of what we see as our stocks might be. The USDA doesn't make those final number adjustments until September.
All right. Thank you very much, sir.
Have a good day, and let's hope to keep the markets stabilized and maybe a little bounce. I don't know what's going to happen in the Mid East. That one still is not completely settled either. That's another factor to keep in our mind.